Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at North Norfolk District Council at the 14th of February. And our first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence.
I've received apologies from councillors Bull and Penfold.
Thank you. Moving on to substitutes. Do we have any?
No.
Thank you. Okay. Item 3 is public questions and statements.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 4 is the minutes of the last meeting. That's the meeting that was held on the 24th of January. We can go through them, please, for accuracy and then pick up any matters arising from those after that. So, okay, starting with page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Are you content that they are a fair and accurate? Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a very quick question. I can't actually see it in the minutes, but I did raise a question about the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and rural.
Is that a matter arising?
Is that for the minutes?
The minutes.
I
rather than a matter of accuracy.
Matter arising, then or after the.
Perhaps we can come to that next day. Councillor Howson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I raised a question when we were discussing Treasury management regarding the liquidity ratio. Not because I wanted to find out specifically about the liquidity ratio and what it was. I wanted to know who set the liquidity ratio, because I think we got it in at a factor of 10, I seem to recall. And the question about the liquidity ratio was the fact that, given the current state with local authorities around the country, if it's set by central government, what was the likelihood of any changes in that liquidity ratio, which would then bounce back to our wider investments and our investment portfolio? And that doesn't seem to be reflected in the minutes.
Right. Okay. I presume our recording would confirm that.
Yeah, I picked it up under page 6, just asking the general question, but it doesn't raise the wider questions that Councillor Howson's announced then. So if you want some change wording, I'm happy to do that.
Yes, I think the point I was trying to make, or the point I was trying to elucidate, was the fact that where that liquidity rate is set and whether it's set within central government. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, so you'll put a correction with regard. Are you content that that point has been made and that correction should be made retrospectively? Okay, so any other points of accuracy? No? Could I then have a show of hands, please, or to accept those as an accurate reflection of that meeting? Okay, thank you very much indeed. So now turning to matters arising, and I think in probably order of I've got them at minute 110. That was the community call for action, and the action that we agreed was to set up the task and finish group for that, and that we would hear meeting by meeting an oral progress report on that task force. So, Councillor Holliday, are you able to give us a brief oral update on the progress so far?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm very grateful to Neil White for his support and advice in setting this up, and to the councillors who are contributing so much, which are councillors Boyle, Bull, Vickers and Housden. We're doing evidence gathering, and the majority of our witnesses that we're questioning are external. We thought that would give us a good overview of the area. We're going to meet every 2 weeks hopefully with 4 witnesses per session. We thought we'd start with Cornwall, as they seem to have lots of innovative solutions. Unfortunately, they can't attend till early March, but so we've changed our schedule very slightly. Our first evidence gathering session is on the preventative work of the housing strategy and delivery team and the pipeline of affordable houses, with a focus on mitigations on nutrient neutrality, because we thought that was a blocker. And then we're looking at rental tenancy agreements, long-term empty homes, domestic abuse, rural poverty, lived experience, and finally best practice. And we've got various outside speakers. I thought I wouldn't give you the detail of the whole programme now, otherwise I won't have anything to say next time. Is that
Okay.
sufficient? I can give you-
I think from my point of view, that sounds from what you've briefed me on so far, that sounds pretty concise. Are there any questions from any members for the chair of that task and finish group? No? Okay, well,
Okay.
thank you for that. And we'll look forward for a further update for our next meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Moving on to other matters arising. Councillor Cushing, I know you have one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just if I could ask Councillor Heinrich, I raised a question about some more details for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and Rural England Prosperity Fund. And we had a correspondence after the meeting, which you said that details that I requested would be sent to me by this meeting, but I haven't received them yet. So I wonder if you could tell me when I might receive them, please.
Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, obviously the summary was circulated during the meeting, which in an oversight earlier. In terms of the details, I've received communication from Councillor Cushing, and it's been passed on to officers who will deal with it in due course. I can't give a timescale, and might ask Officer Quick if he can just give me an update on progress.
So that's still outstanding then?
Yes, Chair, it's still outstanding. It is in progress, but it is still outstanding.
Are you content with that, Councillor Cushing?
Would be helpful to have an indication of when I might actually see them. I didn't think it was that, the details weren't that difficult. I wouldn't have thought to for somebody to collate. So
Yeah, I would add, we know it's the best time to have all this is actually the end of year report on the progress during the year, but we'll do our best to get it to you as soon as possible. But please understand we are rather busy with budget and other matters at the moment.
Okay. Any other matters arising? I'm not aware of any, so I will sign those minutes as a fair and accurate reflection of that meeting. Right, moving on to item 5, items of urgent business. I'm not aware of any. Thank you. Item 6, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations that members need to make today in relation to the business that we have before us? No? Okay, thank you. Item 7, petitions from members of the public. I'm not aware of any. Thank you. Item 8 is consideration of any matter referred to the committee by a member. Again, I'm not aware of it. Yeah. Item 9, responses of the council or the cabinet to committee's reports or recommendations.
Just a quick mention, Chairman, you see that there's a new agenda item for the committee, which it's called a recommendations tracker. The aim being to pick up all the recommendations that come from this committee to cabinet and full council throughout the year. And we'll keep this updated through the year so you can see the progress of them.
Thank you very much. I think that's quite helpful because that gives us an audit trail really of where we've been and where we are. Okay, thank you. Right. Moving on to item 10, that's the revenue budget. So that's the revenue budget for 24/25, and that's to consider the latest iteration of the council's budget for that year and details of the proposed capital programme, along with the proposed bids for inclusion in the capital programme. Councillor Shires. just before we start, of course, we have seen this in its early form at our last meeting, and we did spend quite some time on the bulk of that. So I think it would be really helpful today if we could focus on the changes that have been made between then and now, unless somebody has overlooked something of significance earlier on. If we can keep our focus on that, that will help to structure our debate. So over to you, Councillor Shires.
Thank you. Good morning, members. I appreciate that you've seen this in various forms now, and you're probably getting quite tired of my introduction, so I won't reintroduce some of the issues that we're facing, as I'm sure everybody is more than aware of by now. So following the guidance of the chair, the change that I would like to bring members' attention to is on page 21 in the table, which is explanation of movement. This differs slightly from the last time you saw this table, and at the time of creating this report, this was completely up to date. However, I just want to make members of the committee aware that we have received, well, we now know what the additional funding from the local settlement is. So where we look at the additional use of reserves, in the most up-to-date version of the budget, that now sits at 111,000. And that's due to the 505,000 additional funding that's come from the revised local settlement. So that's not reflected in this report because it's come after the report's been created, but it is reflected in the report that will be going to full council. Aside from that, you have more information in this report than you did in the previous iterations. So I don't really need to add much more to that apart from ask for your question. Sorry.
I suppose you could just speak a bit louder because I'm struggling, or put the microphone near. I'm struggling to hear what you just said, actually. So.
Oh, that's great. Normally I'm too loud, Councillor Cushing. Would you like me to begin again? Yeah, of course, of course. So if we turn to page 21, table 2, where we have the additional use of reserves is there at 416,000. Last time I came to the committee, we spoke about how any additional money, would that come from a reduction in savings or would that come from a reduction in reserves? I stated that we would reduce the amount of reserves that we were looking to use. So the amount of reserves that we're looking to use now sits at 111,000 rather than 416. And that's due to the 305,000 that came through as additional funding from the revised local settlement. That's the only update from my perspective that I wanted to bring, purely because this document was created before we knew the full settlement, but it is reflected in the full council documents. The other thing is that you have more information in this pack than you've had previously, and I'm hoping that it's a clearer view of the breakdown of things to help steer some questioning. But I don't think that I need to add more, but I will defer to Officer Stankley if there's anything that she would like to highlight to the committee.
Okay, thank you. Officer Stankley.
Good morning, everyone. I don't think there's really anything more to add. The capital programme has changed slightly, but I can pick that up if we look at the capital programme and you have any queries about that. Thank you.
Sure. Open to questions. Councillor Boyle.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the input we've been able to have over the recent months with the formation of the budget and overviewing and scrutinising it. I think that's been very helpful. I think we're in a better position to understand it than we would have been. My question really is, how can Scrutiny support the budget role in monitoring next year? Are there any particular factors that you would think would be useful from where you're sitting on the other side? Obviously, we have our own agenda as well, but thank you.
Yes, so we do have the budget monitoring reports coming through, and I believe Officer Stankley will be creating the calendar of the reports that would come through, so we're aware of what's coming up. I think if any members of the committee are unsure about what they're looking at with the budget, please feel free to ask. If there's additional support or training that you need, please let us know, because I value this committee as a critical friend to the council. And I think that it's really important that you are all confident in your questioning. I think the areas that I would really like focus on is where we've proposed savings to help us keep ourselves accountable, to make sure that we're meeting those. And when you do get the budgets coming through the monitoring process, where there isn't where we've underspent or overspent according to where we should be, I think those are questions that we should be asking as a council to help hold officers, the cabinet, portfolio holders and ourselves to account for getting the best value for money for council taxpayers.
Thank you, it's
Okay.
very helpful.
Thank you for that. Can I just draw your attention back to table 2? You've mentioned one of the changes there. Can I just ask you, there's a line there which says savings to be identified at 250,000. Was that in our last budget paper?
I believe it was. I'm just flipping to the correct page for you because I believe there was a question when we had the conversation about additional. So when we met last and we spoke about the amount of reserves that we were looking to use in January, that was at 718,000. And at that point, I informed the committee that we were not content with that being the full amount that came from reserves, and we would be looking to have in-year savings. And at that point, I was asked a question about what the savings would look like and how confident we would be going forward with that. So at that point, we'd said that we would look for 250. Cabinet had hoped for 400,000, but we think 250 is more realistic with the current situation, because we've then got to look at the future budget in terms of making a higher level of saving.
So just to clarify that, that table, as we saw it last time, had a balance at the bottom. Did it have that line of 250,000 with the savings to be identified?
Not in that table. It came in the cabinet paper, which is why it's been here, but it was a verbal update to the committee at the last time.
Okay, so going back to the changes that we ought to be considering today, is that one of the changes that we ought to be considering today?
We can, sorry, from my perspective, I've repeated myself so many times, it's quite difficult to keep track of what information. I'm happy for that to be a question, a line of questioning, and I think that that sits in with the question regarding our solidity in realising the savings we've also put at 975,000. So for clarity, in the purple papers last time, which weren't purple papers from my memory, because they'd already been brought once before, there was 975,000 that were identified, and there were questions raised about how confident we were. And the subsequent conversation is, how confident are we that we can find another 250,000? Thank you for highlighting that, Chair. And if my recollection is correct, but I'm happy to be corrected if not, I informed the committee that there are other savings proposals that were brought forward by officers. Is that correct? The committee's nodding. Okay, great. That there are other savings proposals that were brought forward by officers that we feel need a little bit more work on before they can actually go out. Some of those are due to sensitivities with regards to staffing, for example. So there are lots of things that we would need to do before we inform the committee and made it public, because it's quite sensitive. And I said, I believe at the last meeting, that I was happy at any point if the committee wanted to see what those proposals look like that we didn't accept, then I'm happy if we could do that confidentially to inform the committee so that they know the work is being done by officers and the cabinet to realise where we need to be in the next financial year.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that, because that actually pops up in other parts of the paper as well, doesn't it? It popped up in table 1 on column 3, line 5, and it also pops up in the commentary on paragraph 3.3 as well. So that's something that we ought to also focus on. So thank you for that. Councillor Hankins.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, Do the numbers that we're looking at reflect the very latest situation in terms of central government's contribution towards the council?
I answered that in my previous introduction. So since the papers were, so the figures are as they are. The only change that we've made is where we've identified a larger amount coming out of reserves. That isn't the case now because of the additional funding that came through.
Okay.
So the figures are the same. The only change is where the additional reserves that we were looking to use was 416. That's now 111 because of the additional 305. So the books still balance the same way. We're just getting more money externally.
So how
not
much
taking
was
it from
that
reserve.
change?
305,000 was the additional. So if you look on table 2 on page 21,
Mhm.
the bottom line that says additional use of reserves to balance the budget, we have got 416,000 there. That's now 111 because
Okay.
there is another line that says we've had more money. So
Okay.
it still balances the same. There's just
Thank you. First part of the question.
Yep.
Second part of the question. This, in line 26, paragraph 2, this includes an assumed increase of £4.95. Now, my understanding is that has not yet been approved. That has to go to council, is that correct?
the entire budget has to go to full council. Unfortunately, the government funding relies heavily on the government's directive that there is increased local taxation.
Okay.
And as part of setting the budget, that increase has to be agreed as part of the budget process. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Housden.
Thank you, Chairman. Line 16, retained business rates. I did raise this at the previous meeting. My concern is the state of the economy and the state of businesses at the moment. And that's up 1.3 million. How confident are we that that's achievable?
That figure of the 7.683 is based on a government return that we have to make to government, which captures all the latest figures that we have in the revenue system in terms of businesses that are paying council business rates now. So it is as up to date as it possibly can be. We can't sort of forecast any businesses that may go into administration, but it is as up to date as it can be and as accurate as it can be. At
So
this point
that's
in time.
taken on historic figures for the
No,
last.
it's taken on the figures that we have at the time of having to complete the report, the NNDR 1 form.
So that's, and the date of that is?
We had to have that submitted by the 31st of January, I think it was. I think we submitted it the last week of January, and that is the figures on the system at the time. So that would be current figures.
So any reduction in that is not reflected. So we are effectively working on a historic figure from the previous year, effectively.
We're working on figures that the current figures that were available when we did the report in January. So not historic figures. They were the figures that were in the system at the time. So it was all the businesses that were paying business rates at that time.
But we're looking at a situation where potentially business are failing. We know the cinema in Fakenham might close, for instance. So that's a business that could well be lost. So we're looking at potential business failures in the next 12-month period at least, but we're not really reflecting that as a safeguard because we're using a mechanism that actually is working purely on figures that are historic. Is that my reading of the situation? Is my reading correct?
We predict business.
Well, we can't predict who is going to remain in business and who isn't. And it's, I think we have a business rates reserve to smooth this up and down of business rates income. That's what the reserve is set up for. So we would need to draw upon that if we fell short on our income.
Well, then what's the percentage of that reserve, or how much is that reserve?
I think it's about 1.5 million.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to that 250,000 of unidentified savings, I can't actually see it in the minutes. I may be being a bit thick, but I can't remember talking about it before. Anyway, how confident, I took two questions. How confident are we that that is going to be achieved, given that we've got no detail about what it might be? You can answer the first bit first.
Of course, I remember raising, sorry, Jill.
Sorry to interrupt. As you spoke, I do remember you mentioning exactly as you repeated it. You repeated what you said, I'm pretty sure, fairly accurately at what was at the last meeting about the 250,000. I'm not sure where it was in the write-up, but I do recall. I suppose we could track back to the recording to do it, but I do recall the conversation, which is why I was nodding.
Yeah, I think that if it's an issue of any significance, then we can check the recording on that.
Stop.
But
No.
yeah, carry on.
What's more of more interest is how,
Sorry?
what is it for more interest is how assured we are that we're going to achieve it, I think.
Indeed.
That's a great question. Sorry, you have to just forgive me for making sure that I'm fully informing every time that I present this, because this is not my first rodeo. So if I say something that you've not heard, please do challenge it. So I am confident enough that it will sit in the budget. Officer Stankley is confident enough to put it in the budget. So we have, as I've said previously, we have enough ideas and enough things that we think can work as came forward as part of the first process. I have offered, and I'll offer again, for overview scrutiny to have a look at some of the proposals. I'm not hiding anything. The reason why they're sensitive is because some of them need a little bit more work and some of them may have an impact, which could impact staff or it could impact the public. And until we know for definite, I'm not willing to put them out because I don't want to cause anybody unnecessary concern to our staff team. And I don't want the public to feel like we're going to do something that we may not do, because I don't think that that is fair for anybody to have that level of uncertainty. With what we have, I'm completely confident, but I'm happy to share those with overview and scrutiny. Obviously, you don't have access to that at that meeting, but I did offer previously at the previous meeting the opportunity to see those as well.
Part two is about the medium-term financial plan. Are we allowed to talk about that now? It's part of the same agenda item, isn't it? And it seems to be, again, I think I mentioned this last time, it's sort of tucked away at the end, and I don't know if enough emphasis is being placed on it. And I would wonder if we could perhaps bring it forward in terms of importance, given that's where we're going to be in a few years' time. And I had a specific question. For 25-26, does that number include the £1 million that we might be short?
Which page, sorry?
On page 28.
Yep.
Is the possible shortfall in terms of the food waste collection being taken into account for 25-26? Thank you.
Can you ask that in a slightly different way? Because I've missed the general part of the question you wanted to ask because it's been broken up with.
Okay, the general part was, I don't think we put enough emphasis on the medium-term financial plan, and it seems to be always tucked away at the end of the budget report, and we don't spend so much time thinking about it as we should. And obviously it's very important given that the financial circumstances in which we find ourselves. That's the general preamble. And then my specific question, if you look at the waste contract paper, it says there's a possibility that we might have been reimbursed sufficiently to the costs of our food waste collection. And I wondered if that possible shortfall was being reflected in the medium-term financial plan. Thank you. Because it's quite a considerable amount of money, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, so you're asking about agenda item 12. That's the waste update. Yeah. Okay, that's a great question. I'll defer to Officer Stankley on that. And then there is, I guess, Steve, would you be best on point to answer that about the shortfall?
The council has been written to by the Secretary of State for Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, making us a capital allocation of funding to introduce a food waste scheme. That's for the purchase of food caddies, collection bins and collection vehicles. there is concern across local government that the funding offered isn't sufficient, and there are representations being made back to government through the District Councils Network and the Local Government Association. So I believe that the position that is included in the papers is accurate at the present time. We will get a capital allocation before the end of this financial year and are required to do quarterly reporting from the 31st of October this year through until the 31st of March 2026. Those representations to government continue.
Thank you.
Could I just add that they're not included in the papers for clarity? It's capital funding, and they would be included in the capital programme, which we would bring back to full council in due course when we know what we are doing in terms of that scheme, which is yet to be fully worked up. And then we would, as I say, bring it as an addition to the capital programme.
You comfortable with that? Councillor Cushing, do you have a follow on to that, or is it a separate question? Can I just pursue that one a little further? With respect to the 250,000 yet to be identified, I'm thinking about full council next week, when, as far as we're concerned, this budget will move forward to full council next week.
Yes.
So my question really is, can full council approve a budget with savings yet to be identified as, if you like, a gap closure?
Yes, that is a common practice across local authorities, that their savings yet to be identified is included as a way of balancing the budget, and those savings have to be monitored carefully throughout the year to make sure that they're achieved. That is, we're not doing anything exceptional or, that hasn't been done before. It is something that I think we can achieve. I'm quite confident, otherwise I wouldn't have included it in the budget.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I can only say that from my own experience sitting on two authorities, I have yet to see, this will be a first for me, to see a line on a budget which has got savings yet to be identified as, if you like, the gap closure. Now, I'm not challenging what you said. I'm just simply saying that I've not seen that before, and it's a matter of concern to me. But more than that, I guess there's a follow-on question there, and that is that in terms of transparency with our electorate, do you think that that is transparent enough with the electorate to say that we are going forward with a budget where there is that quantity to be identified, and the public won't know what that is, and of course we don't know what that is either? So I would welcome your comments on that, please.
I don't think it's fair to say we both sit on the same with the two councils, whereas we're not throwing a target at our officers if you need to find an additional amount in year, and we're not just throwing a figure of where that will come from. We are doing this methodically based on what is best for our residents and best for the plans that we've got in years ahead. So the opposing part of that could be that we would say to each officer team, we need you to find this amount in year, and not proceed, not giving any strategic direction and not really thinking about how that would impact residents. So we've put it all together in one, rather than saying this service area is going to find 10% and this service area is going to find 10%, or there will be this amount of money found in this service area, not giving information. We've been very specific in the information that we've given regarding the savings that we're proposing, very specific, and you can see how we have specified each area of how we're going to make those savings. The part that we're not doing is we're not going to brandish, we want to see a saving across the council of this percent. We don't believe that we are there, because we have more than adequate. And this is probably the fourth time you'll have heard me say it now. If this committee wanted to see the proposals that we've got, which haven't yet gone beyond cabinet and CLT and assistant directors, then I'm more than happy to go through that with you. It is not fair to staff within this organisation or the wider public to cause concern about the array of choices that we've got without having some funneling down of what we're actually looking to do.
Okay, that's fine. That I think probably if I just take you a little bit further forward, in terms of transparency, from what you just said, you are comfortable with that? Thank you. One other point I need to confirm, and that is just sort of looking at this from a purely lawfulness point of view. So my question to you as the monitoring officer is, in all respects, and I'm talking about the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, I suppose here really, is are you comfortable that should this budget be presented to full council next week as it is, that this will meet the requirements of law?
Well, following on from what Councillor Shires and Officer Stankley have indicated, no budget can be completely risk or free from risk or with entirely firm sums, and necessarily assumptions will need to be made, which means there's a certain amount of uncertainty. But here there's been information from Councillor Shires that there are savings identified. She hasn't said exactly what they are, but she's confident that they're going to be delivered, but they're being worked on and they can't be shared at the moment publicly due to sensitivities. And it sounds as though it largely involves personal data. So there's a balancing exercise where personal data is involved, and it sounds like there's strong grounds not to share that in public at the moment, but it can be shared with the committee. So even though there are things that aren't entirely fixed at the moment, you will receive the Section 151 officer's report at full council, which will give her it's a Section 25 report, so that members can take into account a report from her where she provides her view as to the robustness of estimates of reserves. And I think that with the additional information and the other factors which are detailed in that report, and which I've added my comments in, I think that is a lawful basis to consider it.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. I think your point about risk is well understood by all of us. I don't think there's been a budget that's come before any council that hasn't had to balance risks. It was really on that very narrow point about the identification of savings. And I guess there's just one other issue that I think we ought to cover at this stage, and that is, in terms of our duties as councillors, does that meet? I'm thinking about particularly our fiduciary duty. Does that sit comfortably with those duties that we have as councillors?
Well, every individual member will have to consider the position and consider all the information at that full council themselves. But I can't see a reason in regard to what's being discussed today that there is an unlawfulness problem there.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Vickers, and then Councillor Cushing, Councillor Housden, and then Councillor Toy, Councillor Hankin there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I was aware that there was a £250,000 hole in the budget, so I agree with Councillor Boyle that this has been raised before, but I would like a determination that Councillor Shires will definitely meet some of us or all of us outside of this meeting, and we really do just have to look at where the savings are going to come from. I appreciate that this might be sensitive material, but we really, for my own personal satisfaction, would like to see that information. Thank you.
Councillor Shires.
Absolutely. I am very open, as I've said to every single person in this room and all councillors, that this is not just a me process, this is everybody's process. I'm happy to do that. I just want to reassure the committee that at some point, when you had the original papers, we were willing to use reserves. So the reserves amount there that we were willing to use was 416,000. I'm not really willing to use reserves when I know that we have other savings that we can make. The reserves aren't being spent on anything else. They're just not being allocated. So if at all the committee feels that Cabinet's intention to not spend our reserves is incorrect, then I'm happy for that challenge to be levied, because we believe as a Cabinet that there are more savings that have been identified that can be delivered in year. But if you are not comfortable with that, then I'm happy if the committee feels that we should use our reserves instead, because that was the original intention. So
I don't think that's the case at all. That was not the gist of my question. I'm not at all content with using reserves, but it's only right. We should be fully aware of where you intend to get these savings from. It's only fair, not only to people that sit on this committee, but to the residents of North Norfolk.
Can I just invite the monitoring officer to give us a further advice on that, please?
I mean, one option, I know councillor Shahs has agreed to meet with members of the committee to share information, and she may have that information separately, but one option is that the committee could go into private session here today.
I'm happy for us to do that. I am just aware that the committee haven't had access to the papers, so it would be new information. So I don't feel the committee would be fully prepared, but I'm happy. Like I've said consistently, I'm completely transparent. So if that's where we want to be, we would have to go into private business, but I know you haven't had the information yet.
Okay, so how does the committee feel about this? Do you want to go into private session at this time to explore that? Or are you content to move?
I think we should. Why didn't we have this in purple papers? Why couldn't we have had this in purple papers?
Because obviously, as I said at the previous meeting, and every time I've met you, and I'm really sorry that I repeat myself, I've offered that access to the committee. This is not the first time that I've offered that. So when we had the purple papers last time, I was very clear that those are the savings that had been chosen, and the ones that we hadn't chosen hadn't come through, but I was more than happy for the committee to look at them. So this is not fresh information to this committee.
Well, I think we should go into private session then. I think we should discuss it.
Okay, we've got a proposer, have we, and a seconder for that? Are you proposing that, councillor Housden? Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Vickers? Okay, so the proposal is to move into private session for that discussion of those items. Can I have a show of hands, please? That's 5-4 against. Yeah. So we are not going to do that on the basis of that vote.
We haven't had it against yet.
Sorry, no, we haven't had. So those show a show of hands against them, please. Those abstaining? Right, so that's 5 abstentions.
We just pause the session for the moment.
Indeed, we can. Okay, well, thank you for that. As I read out a few minutes ago, the order of questions that I've got: Councillor Cushing, Councillor Housen, Councillor Toy when he returns. Those people, of course, that have been asked to leave can now join us again, and Councillor Hankin. So, Councillor Cushing.
Yeah, one comment a bit. I think following up the point that Councillor Holliday made about the medium-term financial strategy and plan is well made. I think we have seemed to have reports and everything under the sun, but this always seems to be tucked at the end of the actual budget these days. And I think actually there are an awful lot of issues in there that we ought to be looking at, particularly pertaining to a number of the issues that have been discussed here in public session and indeed private. And I think probably a more robust medium-term financial strategy document would help. I do have two questions, if I may, on the capital programme. So I'll ask the first one, if I may. The one that we've got at the moment, which totals £975,000 in terms of savings, do any of those items need to go out to public consultation before they can actually be embedded in sort of actually nailed down as actual savings or new income?
The savings aren't part of the capital programme. Did you say the capital programme? Sorry.
Programme, sorry, the savings, the £975,000. As that second question relates to the capital programme. So we're looking at page on our report 53.
I don't think they would do at this point, quickly looking through them, because none of them are relating to reductions in service largely.
Councillor Shires.
Okay, so for example, sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you there, Tina. So on page 56, for example, if we look at Res 33, obviously that will be subject to some public consultation because of what we're looking to do, which is the extension of the car park. So there are some things here that will form part of consultation through the very basis of what we're suggesting. Is that what you mean, Councillor Cushing?
As a follow-up to that question is the consultation, is it effectively, are we just going through the motions consultation, or is it actually we could consult the public, come back and everyone else who have a comment on that, say, no, we don't want to do it, so therefore it be removed from the savings list?
I wouldn't like to think that we consult for the sake of consulting. All our consultations are meaningful, and that consultation would go through the planning process, of which is a very meaningful consultation. And we know, many members of us know here how the planning process works. So, you know, that depends on how the public feel about what we're about to do. So that's one of the items in here that would form part of a public consultation.
Thank you. So obviously there's a risk there. The second one actually relates to the capital bids, which is on page 64. Haven't had the chance yet to look at the full council agenda for next week, but have the cabinet actually accepted all these capital bids?
So these came to cabinet. There is some, this is the current proposals. That doesn't mean that this is the final list. From my perspective anyway. There are some things that we had that we were uncertain of. So for example, if you look at page 63, the bottom of page 63, that is a 4-year programme rather than an in-year capital bid. That's over 4 years, so that needs looking at. There are some things in there that we were not fully content with in their final form, if that makes sense. So if we look at the refurbishment of the pier pavilion, that's an intention. So this is our latest list of intentions. And as always, this committee has known that at some point through the year, There have been additional capital works that have come up. For example, I can raise the issue of the toilet at Holt, which was an unseen element of needing to come into the capital programme. So this is the current intention, but as always, I've said it's subject to whether or not the final proposals are fully accepted.
Thank you. Okay. It seems this morning we're trying to nail jelly to the wall, and a lot of these issues, aren't we? So when will we know the answer to that?
So say, for example, that some of these come back. So this is the current proposal. Say, for example, something comes back and we've known through the massive cost of inflation over the last 12 months that the final proposal that comes forward is far more than we're willing to spend, then that's when we would know that we're not willing to do that project. We're not just going to throw money after something because we've decided it's a good idea. These projects in their current form with their current funding request are what we've accepted. But that doesn't mean that we're unwilling to say no, because that's not the best use of taxpayers' money if funding is needed to be increased for some of the projects. Does that answer your question more? If we enter another,
gives me an answer, yes.
if we enter another issue where the building sector sees a 50% increase in materials, that's going to grossly affect the cost of some of these things. We couldn't foresee that happening when it happened originally. And I can't say that I can predict that that isn't going to happen in the next 12 months. So in the current form, with the current amounts, these are the current proposals that we've accepted, but I'm not willing to say that we would accept them even if they massively increased. I'm not willing to accept that. And I'm not willing to say on behalf of Cabinet that we would accept a massive increase in costs. So current form, current money that's been asked for, yes. The only thing that I want to change is the replacement bin programme is over for 4 years, and that's not a single year. That's as concrete as I can be in this wonderful, ever-changing economic climate and uncertainty, specifically going into a general election.
So, yes, Officer Stankley.
Yes, with regards to the capital programme, the final proposed programme is included in the full council papers, which have now been published. They are split over the 4 years, so you'll be able to see the funding over the 4-year period, along with the proposed financing of the capital programme, and the bids have been included, but it will be for full council to decide upon those bids at full council meeting. They are the ones that have been proposed by Cabinet.
If I just follow, so are you saying next week then they are going to be presented to us for inclusion in the capital programme, or that sort of
Yes,
sounds
they have been put into the full council papers, yeah.
Right, okay, so they will be form part of the new programme, so they'll be added in there subject, but obviously I understand that, you know, when the time comes, you'll take a view as we want to proceed. Okay, fine, that would have been an easy answer.
Sorry.
Okay. Right. Just to follow up the point that you made about the medium-term financial strategy, I'm mindful that in our work programme, and we haven't got to that yet, but the work programme does specify the budget and the medium-term financial strategy. So where in this paper is the strategy, or isn't it here? When are we going to see that?
I think the question that I want to ask back to the committee is that this has been presented in many different ways over the years, and the committee is never satisfied with the information that's presented. It's either too much or not enough. So in the current form, it's in there. So if you're not content with it, may I ask that the committee reflect on what they would like to see in order to scrutinise it effectively, because the officer team are working to their directive. So if you need something changing or you're not happy with it, you need to be quite explicit in what that looks like, because otherwise you're going to remain unsatisfied every time I bring papers to you that there isn't enough information or there's too much. So I would ask that the committee reflect on what it is they want to see to enable the scrutiny of that to be done effectively.
I think we might be able to help you there, at least with a start point, because I think SIPFA has actually got a description, a very good description of what should be in a financial, medium-term financial strategy. And if we follow, as we often do, the good practice and guidance of SIPFA, that would be a useful starting point, I think, to that discussion. So could I just refer you to that? I don't know whether Mr. Stankley is familiar with that, but that would be a good start point.
Yes, the strategy that's presented in the papers do follow the principles of the SIPFA code. But we can provide more or less as you see fit. But we have gone by the principles contained within the code.
Well, yes, okay. I mean, I won't. I've got it up on my screen at the moment, but I won't read it because it's not, I don't think, the appropriate time to do that. But it really does give a good a description of what we ought to be looking at in terms of a strategy. What I think we're seeing mostly is a financial plan, is the plan which is spread over the coming years. And I think this is the time really to separate out and clarify people's understanding about what is a strategy and what is a plan. And this may be helpful to do in very shortly. Thank you. Councillor Shires.
Yeah, and the glorious thing about guidance is that it's completely open to interpretation. So Officer Stankley, as our financial professional, has interpreted it in a way which is of her profession. If we are looking at the interpretation and we would like to see something more because it's not as apparent, then again, I refer it back to the committee to ask what it is that you need to see from it. Because from my perspective and from Officer Stankley's perspective, we're presenting information that we feel would work. So if it doesn't work, we need to know why and what and how you need this to be presented differently to enable you to have a full and transparent way of scrutinising. I need to know what you want.
Well, I think we have actually been clear about what we want because we've had this discussion before, and we've had a separate strategy presented as a separate paper, which is more. And I'm going back now, okay, a couple of years, but we actually set that as a standard that we were looking for, and then it got conjoined together. But let's not revisit that debate because we are where we are, and the suggestion that I'm putting forward is that the SIPFA guidance is one that's well worth looking at to begin with, and we can move forward with the advice and guidance that's already been, agreed by SIPFA really as what we ought to be considering.
And I understand that, and Officer Stankley has already stated that that's the guidance that follows. I would like to hear from the committee what they need to be able to see in it, because it's not useful for us to have conversations repeatedly touching on a subject but without definitive instruction. So I'm really happy for the committee to help shape what they need to know. But Officer Stankley's already stated that she's used the guidance to form what's there already. So if there's information that you can't see or isn't apparent as a committee, then I would really like to know how to make that clearer for everybody.
So I think there's a discussion really, once the committee is familiar with that guidance, there's a discussion that we can have. So can we move on then to Councillor Housden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did raise this question before and I have forgotten the answer. If we go to page 25, the delivery plan, could you just tell me how that's dropped down to 472,000? Good, Officer Stankley. Sorry, I think we did have this discussion before and I completely forgotten. Page 25, delivery plan, item on the use of reserves.
This is table 10.
Table 10, yes.
Yeah. The reason that there's such a drop is in the use of the reserve is that we're not funding the fixed term contracts that have been funded in the delivery plan previously. They are all coming to an end at the 31st of March 24.
Right, thank you. And just finally, the council holds a general fund reserve and it refers to Appendix D. I don't have Appendix D in my block. So the general reserve fund, which it keeps for unexpected expenditure or emergencies, what is the percentage of that in terms of the reserves that we hold? what's the percentage level?
Sorry, councillor Housen, did you say you don't have appendix B?
No, it says appendix D in my papers on
Okay,
page
sorry.
25, the last line of the top paragraph, but I can't find an appendix D, so I'm struggling a bit. You can let me know, you can give me a written.
The,
answer if you like.
Yeah. As at the end of this financial year, we would see reserves without knowing what the final outturn position is at 2.4 of 14.5
2.4, 14.5.
in total, yeah.
So it's just under 2%, about 1.8%. That's fine. Okay, thank you very
Right.
much. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Hankin and then Councillor Joy.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 26, table 11, can I ask a question? Is the increase in council tax revenue purely predicated on the 4.95 increase? Or is there any population movement in that calculation?
It does include, it's based on council tax, the council tax base. That form is, the information for that comes from the position as at the end of October 23.
Okay.
That takes into account all the houses that we're aware of that are, should be paying council tax. So there is in the medium-term financial plan, we've built in an increase of 1% per year in that council tax base.
1%?
Yeah.
Okay. That population movement?
Well, it's not so much population movement as housing movement, numbers in houses available.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well, the reason I ask that question is, I think there's some good news here, some potential good news. I've been working with the revenue officer, Sean Knight, right, to identify a number of potential residencies that should be paying council tax and aren't paying council tax. And there's a significant difference there. I think there's an upside here. I don't know how to go about it. We need to think about this, but there's a significant upside to be had on income to track down residents, long-term residents that aren't paying council tax. Sorry, I give away. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Hankin. You have worked very hard on that. And the matter that Councillor Hankin has alluded to is where people are living in potentially holiday accommodation or accommodation that isn't currently being used as residential. And Councillor Hankin has worked quite hard to ensure that people who are living in North Norfolk as full-time residents are paying their fair share of council tax. So thank you very much for your work on that. The other work that we do in terms of that, and I've said do, I'm very sorry, is with our empty homes officer, which sits within the revenues team, who is working very hard where there are empty homes to try and bring them back into use, which can either, become a business which we see across the districts in terms of second homes and holiday homes, or will come back into residential use and pay council tax. Thank you.
Can you put your mic on, please?
The last tranche that we've identified is 10. And we're talking about significant amounts of money. What I don't know, other than what I've been able to do myself, how that can be accessed. How we can, I mean, as I understand it at the moment, if you register to vote, you automatically trigger council tax. That may or may not be the case, but that's what's happened in a number of situations. Now, are there any other instruments that could trigger that situation? That's the question I'm asking.
I think the point you're making is one that well worth exploring. And I know from my own ward work that I have been working with Mr. Knight, and we have identified a number of inquiries that need to be followed through and may lead to increases in revenue for council tax. And I think actually this is one where perhaps ward members can actually be of some considerable help here, because we ought to know our wards pretty well. We ought to get to know our wards pretty well, and we would be, I think, able to give, if you like, starters for 10 for the revenue team to make those inquiries. And so I take your point, and that's work I think that's worth taking forward. So I think it's a point well made, but I'm not sure that we need to debate that much more today, because I think if we agree that in principle, then that's what I think ward members ought to be encouraged to do. So maybe one of the actions should be to make that known to the wider council.
Chair, I was just going to say that's one of the areas long-term empty properties at the Homesteaders Task and Finish group will be looking at, and that is, it might be one of the draft questions that's already been drafted for potential witnesses.
Yes, I mean, all I'm alerting to is the fact there's some upside here. To be tackled, significant upside. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I come here obviously as the chairman of GRAC to listen to what's going on. Obviously, you've had a conversation where I was not in the room, so I'm going to say what I was going to say, and I apologise if it's repeating or if you've already got that clarity. It was to do around the robustness of the 250,000. So my understanding is, and I'm using round figures, £750,000 of savings were offered by officers. Roughly 300,000, I think, was accepted. I may have the wrong figures, but there was a significant amount. Let's just say a significant amount of savings were offered by officers. The robust ones were accepted. We've had further money from government, which has reduced it. We're now down to the 250. So they are savings that have been identified, but because of the things that the monitoring officer and Councillor Shires have presented to you, that they need to be purple papers for reasons I believe will have been explained now. So in terms of the confidence of that 250,000, we actually have more than that has been offered, and it is finding the ones that are the most robust to deliver in the terms that Councillor Shires offered, that deliver our services and not being an imposed saving. So I was just going to offer that to try and help the committee to understand how that had been chipped away to that 250, but actually there was more available than that. So that was it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologise if it's
no, that's all right. All I would just point out is sometimes it's quite confusing. For example, you've used the term "those have been identified," but in our papers it says "yet to be identified."
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You can understand this is a public meeting, and the public will hear this. And you have said that they've been identified, and I know when we know what you mean by that.
Yeah.
But the public will also see in our papers "yet to be identified," and we have to kind of square that circle.
And that was where a session with the purple papers may have helped, because you could see those things that had been identified as potential. So yeah. So why it says yet to be identified is to be identified from a suite of options. Yes. Okay. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. So hopefully that's helped. But I'll finish there. Thank you.
Okay. So are we all done on questioning? Are there any recommendations that you want to take forward?
Coming back to the medium-term financial strategy, I think we ought to go away and come up with a suggestion of what we actually want to see in that document, probably based on the emails that we've had, which detail that. But I think that would be helpful. So I don't know how we want to go do that. Whether some of us go away and do that offline, or
well, I think we can take that as a recommendation, and I do think that there is a committee discussion that needs to be had with regard to what that strategy needs to look like, and from there on, and as already said, you know, I think we need to start off with the SIPFA guidance to begin with, and then we can refine that into what we believe is more or is appropriate for North Norfolk.
There are some recommendations on page 17.
Yes. So So in addition to those that are already drafted on page 17 are, and I think you've raised one, councillor Cushing, with respect to further work to do on the medium-term financial strategy in developing what that needs to look like. So the recommendations here are that we obviously undertake the post-cabinet scrutiny. We've done that and make recommendations. There's one that's just come forward, and we consider the list of proposed savings, use of reserves and setting of our savings targets, and make recommendations to full council on the combination to include in the budget for 24-25 for full council to consider on the 21st of February to set a balanced budget, and that the committee should review the capital programme and new capital bids and make a recommendation to full council on which bids should be included in the programme. Okay, so I'm not sure that we've made recommendations in regard to what should or shouldn't go into the capital programme, but I think my understanding is that there'll be further discussions to be had in any event. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be very, very clear, because obviously where we've got, sorry, going back to table 2 on page 21, the additional reserves use, that isn't the current position. The current position is that is 111,000. So
Yes.
I would like that reflected in the recommendation, please. Because our commitment to not use reserves for the deficit is very, very clear. So it doesn't, because it's changed. Can we get that altered in the recommendation, just so that we're not making a recommendation on the reserves for 416? Because we're in a different position now, there's fresh information.
So our acceptance, I think, of what's been presented is that figure of 416 now reads treble one. So I think that's acknowledged, and that will be reflected in the minutes in any event. So are you comfortable then with the recommendations that are on page 17, plus that we carry the work forward in terms of the medium-term financial strategy to develop what we are looking for in the future? Can I have a proposer and a seconder for those then, please? Councillor Hankin, propose? Yeah, and the second. So can I have a show of hands then, please? Thank you. Right. We've been going for an hour and 3/4. I think that's probably a time maybe to just take a comfort break before we tackle the next items of business. I think we've given this a really good scrutiny, so thank you for that. So I will adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes, and if we say we're back here to resume at 11:25. Okay, thank you. Thank you for returning and for the opportunity to adjourn for a comfort break. So returning to our agenda, item 11, that's the pre-scrutiny of local economic strategy and action plan. Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. Before I go into the details of the Sustainable Economic Growth Strategy, I'd like to start by thanking my officers for the very considerable work they've undertaken in preparing this paper. During that time, they've researched the approaches to economic growth of many other authorities. They've visited a wide range of businesses across the district in order to increase our understanding, not just of the range and diversity of businesses in North Norfolk, but to better understand their future and current needs. And it's from that it has informed that strategy. As a bit of background first, I took over this role after elections in May. At that time, I looked at the previous strategy, perfectly sound for its time, but it was becoming outdated given the changes in circumstances. And it hadn't been revisited due to the chaos of COVID and the need for most officers to be working on that. It was clear to me that given the state of the national as well as local economy post-COVID, plus all the other difficulties created by Brexit, you have to accept that poses export difficulties for some companies, other international issues way beyond our control, that we needed to look towards a new approach. To move forward, we needed to know exactly where we are now, as well as where we want to go. We needed that base from which to build. So from that point, I reviewed a number of economic strategies from other authorities, all political complexions. None of us have a perfect answer to everything. That was discussed with officers. PID was developed to create a strategy from key matters that included were the state of the nation, a detailed review of the economic base of North Norfolk as it currently stands, the impact of government, regional, county initiatives, that includes the county deal and what's coming from that, the expectation of the corporate plan, of course, and our sustainability and net zero commitments. From there, we got to three primary objectives: to identify local challenges and barriers to growth, to provide an overview of the present and emerging economic opportunities in terms of the sites and premises available and demanded, in terms of clean growth, such as the proposed hydrogen development at Bacton, use of Scotto, potential for Egmere. And we then wanted to look at the detailed interventions and actions that we as a council can instigate to support or capitalise on any opportunities and overcome barriers to sustainable growth. So we then came to the structure and content that you have before you. A vision for sustainable growth in North Norfolk, a study of the economic and strategic context, detailing of the economic profile and our business survey findings and analysis, looking at enablers to sustainable growth, key things that we need, that will need to happen to realise all the opportunities, and that's regardless of whether by ourselves, by the wider public sector, by the private sector themselves, by voluntary groups, and from that to have an action delivery framework. A key consideration has been that the strategy has to be flexible and adaptable to changing international, national and local situations. Present government unfortunately provides no clear direction for sustainable growth, nor do I see anything better from the party that may form the next government. We're looking into the abyss in some ways. We do not know what is going to happen either next few months or post whenever the election is. So, what have you got before you? At the start, it's the result of considerable research and data analysis, of visits to businesses, of talking to businesses, and particularly to look at the many of the innovative companies that are sitting below the public perception of North Norfolk. We're seeing very much as a tourist economy, an agricultural economy, and nothing else happens. There is a significant number of high-tech and similar media and other companies that do considerable amount of work in the district, and are a critical part of our economic structure. Some of them are world leaders. Officers have considered the structure and focus of strategy documents from a number of other authorities. We've gathered a lot of data and analysed it. We've identified the challenges. We've looked at the strategic context. I mentioned County Deal, and of course, the UK PSF, RUPF, where we're probably one of the most successful councils. We haven't handed many money back. We've spent it all to the benefit of local businesses and local communities. Our expectation of partnership working, another area we have to consider. We now have a much better understanding of how we can move forward. So we're looking in particular at creating an environment for business to thrive in, where new businesses can flourish, inward investment can be nurtured, innovation and creativity welcomed. We're looking to how the infrastructure can be improved to support growth. And that obviously means working with partners, supporting housing provision, economic growth, mitigating climate change, sustainable communities, getting broadband infrastructure actually moving. And we need to ensure the skills are there. From the recent business forum, a need for upskilling the workforce came through very clearly. And that is obviously a difficulty when training is largely in Norwich and the transport out of North Norfolk to Norwich is abysmal. We've outlined how we achieve those objectives on pages 39 to 44, and they will define the approach. The final part from page 47 sets out the action plan for the period of the current plan. Haven't gone beyond that because, as I said, we need to be responsive and flexible because things will change as we move through the remaining 3 years of that corporate plan. So we defined the actions, we've defined the expected output, we've defined the strategic alignment with the corporate plan and with relevant national, regional and county plans. We've set delivery dates. We've defined who will lead the actions on that. We've identified sources of funding. We've identified the desired outcomes. Now, I appreciate that some of you much prefer lots of milestones and KPIs. That's never been my style. I always like just enough data to make the right decisions, not reams of it just for data's sake. As an old farmer would tell you, you don't fatten a pig by weighing it. But I accept that this is a fairly weighty piece of paper. It's not the usual 4 pages of A4. But it was never intended just to be a simple statement. It was envisaged as a tool to celebrate the success and diversity of businesses in North Norfolk, and to be a marketing tool for officers to use when talking to businesses interested in locating in the area. However, I'm happy to explore with officers provision of a much shorter supplementary document that will provide then a rather less wordy overview of our intentions, and will potentially include, subject to cabinet agreement, of course, an executive summary, a short introduction to the context, both local, regional and national, some information on the constraints which have been identified, a highlight of our current priorities from the action plan, how we intend to achieve our objectives, how we will assess our progress against those, including reporting to members and what schedule we might want to report to this committee, for example. And we may try and look forward to priorities beyond 2027, accepting that administration lasts 4 years and each new administration will revisit. But overall success or otherwise the strategy is going to be defined by reaching the desired outcomes as identified in the previous pages. And we're already making progress. We've had the initial work in Stalham led by the High Street Task Force. That's been completed. And staff and officers have worked with the Stalham members to look at how that can be followed up. Regrettably, there is no government funding. It's an idea. We'll give you somebody who'll give you ideas. Now you're on your own. And I'm not going to revisit the budget debate from earlier. We've had the first of the business forums, and that's set a model for how we move forward with more of those. That was involving county as well, so partnership working is there. As you were well aware, the first banking hub will be set up. Regrettably, it's not Fakenham as we would hope, but there are various technical issues around the way in which Link operates, which we're going to need rather more negotiation there. But at least we will get one in Holt, which is to be absolutely welcomed. Members, the approach we set out in the strategy, I think, is already delivering. It's continue to do so. I'll commend it to you, and happy to take any questions you wish.
Thank you, Councillor Heinrich. Questions? Councillor Boyle.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I'd just like to thank the staff and councillors for all the hard work making this new plan. And I found it really, really helpful in giving a broad overview of North Norfolk, particularly having spent a lot of my time in the leisure industry. It's my job when I was here doing it, to see on paper that actually it was only a smaller percentage, it's like 25% or something of the total output of North Norfolk, I think is a really good way forward. And I see that this will move the district forward over the next few years, because we're looking in different directions, which I think perhaps we wouldn't have been in the past. I think things are changing. You're absolutely right. And there's a composition underneath the surface that doesn't always show itself immediately, which the document brings out very well. My question is, what do you see? This is obviously rather a tricky question, but what do you see as the biggest challenge in the current climate to moving this forward?
National economic situation. Until there is an industrial and economic growth strategy which considers rural areas in detail, rather than vague levelling up quotes repeated ad nauseum, I'm not sure we're going to get anywhere. What we can do, of course, is work within all the constraints. It sometimes feels like, you're in the middle of a maze trying to find your way out. But we have to have the confidence that whatever situation is there, we have the flexibility to be responsive to it, to take account of what we can do, knowing what we can't, and work with partners. I mean, the skills is one thing. Assuming county budget doesn't slash any skills support, then we have to work with them because they have the people who can do it. Much as I'd like to employ a couple of people to go around, talk to businesses and look at riding training courses and how we get that done, that's not going to happen. So we work with partners to deliver that.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Councillor Holloway.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I must say it's an excellent document, and thank you everybody who put their time into it. I'd love to see an executive summary as well, because this is almost overwhelming in its comprehensiveness in a good way. I had a couple of questions about the key sectors and sites, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. Are there any sectors that we want to attract rather than looking at sectors that we actually have? And there are some that we don't seem to have. For example, we don't have transport, and we don't have aviation, or we don't have manufacturing, apart from plastics, which I'm a bit surprised to see we have got so much plastics actually. But are there any areas that we would be wanting to bring to North Norfolk?
Any footloose industry that wishes to come, I would say. We do have aviation in terms of Swift Air at the old Cultural Air Base. We have companies that are retrofitting buses with electric power. We have media companies.
I just wondered if they could not be raised then as the sectors that we have, because then it would make us more aware that, I didn't know that we had all these, and if you had them encapsulated in the list, then we'd know we've got media, we'd know we've got transport, we know, I didn't know we had as much aviation till I read the case history. So I just wondered if that could be added, and also as part of that question, the other question was, are there no areas then that we don't cover in terms of industry that we would love to have strategically, rather than saying we'd just like to have everything that would like to come to Norfolk?
If I may refer to Rob.
Yeah, I'm happy to have a go at answering that. Actually, what bringing together this document and undertaking the work that Stuart and his team do, we're constantly lifting up a stone and finding something fascinating underneath it. And there are businesses in North Norfolk doing practically everything, to be honest. And so, some of those are linked to the main sectors of tourism and manufacturing. And I suppose the aircraft element of that is kind of masked within manufacturing overall. But there are amazing stories. There are amazing things going on in all corners of the district. And recently, the business breakfast event that was held a couple of weeks ago, there was a surprising level of optimism actually amongst businesses that attended, and we did a poll on the day of those who were there, and we asked them about challenges as well, and we had lots of discussions about opportunities. I suppose if answers the second part of your question is there anything we'd really want more of? And I suppose if you wanted to define a future USP for North Norfolk, which maybe recognises our peripherality and rurality and all those sorts of things, I suppose it's the green industry sector, however you want to define that. That might be about renewable energy sources, which obviously is happening in a huge way, in international scale off our coast, and that infrastructure needs to be connected to provision in North Norfolk. But the opportunities for green hydrogen, potentially carbon capture and storage, and the transition of those things that do exist, which may be seen as sort of a legacy of oil and gas and previous industrial practices. Now we've got a huge opportunity to transform those, to retain those jobs, to retain that investment, but for it to become green and future thinking. So I suppose that's the thing which we need to work perhaps a bit harder on. But there's a whole range of other, maybe the other end of the spectrum of green related matters. Nature-based solutions are being trialled in all sorts of locations in North Norfolk and across the county. Now those are innovative ways of tackling infrastructure challenges and climate adaptation challenges. But that's research and investment, which is also taking place here. So I don't know whether Stuart's got an alternative answer, but I would say looking forward, it's trying to capitalise more on the green opportunities that exist, and maybe not suggesting that we drive motorways to the area to bring heavier industry.
Yeah, no, I think I completely concur with what Rob said. We've got to reflect on what our strengths are and probably build on those strengths rather than look for gaps that we probably are unlikely to fill. We don't need to pretend that we're on the outskirts, we're within the M25 or on the outskirts of Greater Norwich. There's no point competing necessarily in the same space. But we do have a number of strengths in, particularly we mentioned about tourism, of course. Then if we're by extension of what Rob's saying, then you could look at things like growing our brand, if you like, for sustainable tourism. We have a beautiful environment. We don't want to destroy it. So actually, there's opportunity to build that narrative around sustainable tourism, around our environment, our heritage. Those represent genuine growth areas, but we also, because of the fact that we need to protect them and nurture them, and not let growth dominate them, but actually respect them and showcase them.
Well, just to add to that, sustainability is crucial, but there are industries which are emerging, which will be highly sustainable. I recently attended a conference on seaweed in East Anglia, and we have huge potential off Wells and Holcombe for seaweed production, which would usefully be then processed inland from Wales.
Mm.
You know, so there is an area there which of potential significant growth in the west of the district. You know, just as one example, the film industry rather likes North Norfolk,
Mm.
and we certainly could exploit that more. So there are areas that go way beyond our traditional industries. You know, it's long gone from the days when 140-acre farm was large and you kept the saddler and the blacksmith in business. You know, modern farms need high-tech machinery. You know, there's a potential there to decarbonising agriculture, which we ought to be part of.
Lovely. I had a second question, if that's all right. What's the value of the different sectors? I can see that it's quite clearly labelled for tourism, but I couldn't find it. I didn't read through it in exhaustive detail for the other sectors, just out of interest, because I see the percentages actually, that construction and agribusiness actually have a greater percentage of the total. So I was wondering what their value was.
I can't answer the question about value in relation to the visitor economy, as it's sort of commonly referred to, the tourism sector. We commission annual studies which look at the numbers of visitors, the visitor spend, the sort of spin-offs from that into the wider economy. So that's a specific piece of work which is done. We know the numbers of jobs, we know the sort of sector breakdown in those other areas, but what they bring in terms of economic value to the area, I suppose is a bit more difficult to determine. It's a piece of work that probably could be done. We'd like to understand, you know, from a number of sectors actually where the sort of biggest hitters are, where which things are actually bringing most to our area. The visitor economy sector is undoubtedly the biggest as a single sector, but it comprises, you know, multiple businesses of a variety of different types at all different scales. To bring other sectors together in that kind of way and group them together and identify what the value to the local economy is would be challenging, I think. But I'm not aware of any work which has gone to that sort of level at the district level, at least.
Would that be possible to have that as a recommendation then, to look at that? Because you've got the actual business sizes, so would it be possible not to calculate the business value? Because I know we always do talk about tourism and we emphasize tourism all the time, and I'm just worried that we're not emphasizing the other areas of our businesses sufficiently in our discussions on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Clarify what we might mean by value. So are we talking? So that piece of work, which is a fantastic piece of work, the volume of value report that we get produced every year, uses modelling there's a series of surveys and things that are done sort of built in it, but essentially there is a model. And as with all models, actually it's the consistency of the model rather than the accuracy to the penny of the figures that's the most important thing. I.e., you can see over time that with business data, it can be a bit trickier. So most of our businesses are micro businesses. As such, many of them will submit to many of them will be sole traders, not necessarily submitting data to Companies House. Many will fall below the thresholds for submitting turnover data. And it's only very recently they're even asked to provide numbers of the numbers of people they employ. So that's a recent change in the last 12 months. So it's an area that I definitely would take away, because the understanding and getting under the sort of to a micro level of some of our businesses is something I'd love to do more of. But if we were talking about understanding their turnover, we might not necessarily get to that detail.
Can you put your mic on, please?
We've got on page 26, we've got some quite substantial companies here, which must have, you know, public companies that are quite easy to find their turnover. And we're not looking for absolute fantastic detail. I mean, perfection is the enemy of, isn't it? We're just looking to give an idea of how much these guys contribute. And I just feel that we're not neglecting them, but I'd just like to get an idea of the proportionality between the different industries and sectors that bring value to the this part of the country. Thank you.
Chairman, if I could just add a bit more to that, I suppose that it would be valuable to collect data around the different sectors and add a bit more of that sort of higher level information. When we have individual companies who want to invest here or relocate to here or invest and expand, then quite often that sort of information is provided in support of planning applications and the like. So with some key decisions, key investment decisions, sometimes there is information actually which is on file, and we might be able to get that from other, from planning data, for example, or environmental health or something. So I think we could probably, one of the actions we're happy to take away would be to continue to expand this to provide a sort of a dossier, really, which for some individual businesses might be at a very granular level, and for some sectors might be a little bit kind of further up, more high level. But all data is valuable if we're going to make decisions about future economic policy. Then the more information we've got,
absolutely.
better.
Yeah, and in fact, that's actually acknowledged within the strategy. So in the action plan, one of the actions is to build our business intelligence around some of these gaps. So do completely concur, but we recognise that there will be some areas that we perhaps might not have that data.
But the question about value, I suppose, as well, is that even the tourism one is quite complex, but that's people coming here to spend money here. So we can count the people and count how much money they're putting into the local economy. Businesses that may be headquartered somewhere else, and then, what's the value to here is a little bit more difficult to understand. But there are value in jobs, and then there's the sort of spin-off from those jobs and the local supply chains. So I think it's something which is well worth us looking further into.
Okay. I think it might be appropriate just to add a little bit to what has been said by the portfolio holder here. In the course of this paper coming to this committee today, there have been some further some discussions, should I say, which I know Councillor Heinrich didn't participate, but I'm sure you know something about them. And that was at the pre-agenda stage, there was some concern around the clarity of the document in terms of how the strategy was being described. In other words, what the target audience is and how you can readily present the strategy and the action plan and the case studies and how they relate together. That led to a meeting which was held a couple of weeks ago, involving Officers Young and Quick and Folger and our scrutiny officer and myself and the vice chairman. And I think what I think I need to describe is the object of that was to try and tease out of this what things are really good and what things that we might want to do, perhaps have a look in and see whether we can do in a different way. I'm picking up on the introduction. You quite rightly said where are we now? And I thought that a really positive part of this document was the case studies. There was some really good news there. And I guess the question that occurred to me was, why are we waiting for a strategic document to come to overview and scrutiny when all of these have been rolling out there all the time? Why are we not hearing about these on a regular basis? We have portfolio updates at full council meetings. How many of those do we have in a year? We have a communications team. We have various ways in which these good news stories should be reaching us. And I think to kind of spread the strategy across those 60 pages of this document is not the most helpful thing to do if you want to say, here is our strategy for the next however many years. It is far easier, I think, to tease that out and present that in a more concise way, and you call that your local economic strategy, and you then have an action plan, which I think I don't have any observations particularly about the action plan, but I think what we've got here is a mix. There's some really good stuff which needs to be promoted and celebrated, not just in this meeting today, because every councillor should read those case studies or should have knowledge of those case studies. And I think the problem with the size of documents that we often see is that people are put off from reading the real meat and good news by the volume of what's in there. And so they miss those key messages. And so I think that that's worth saying, because I felt that that meeting that we had was a very positive meeting, and it did tease out those possibilities that we can actually do better than we are now. We can present information in better ways, and we can have a more of a quality debate as well around the strategy and what that should look like. And I would just put that in the mix at the moment and add that to your introduction, Councillor Heinrich. And I know you've got your own view about that, but I would just say that as an open question to consider whether we can do more with this in the future, and perhaps present this, the strategy element anyway, as a more concise document. I think you alluded to that at the end of your introduction.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm always open to suggestions. Even listening to all points of view and all arguments, and then reach my own conclusions. We both know we come from this from slightly different angles, possibly totally diametrically opposed at times. And I think it might have been more useful if I had been invited part of the discussions you had with officers, rather than it being done second hand, as me having to discuss it afterwards. In terms of publicising, a lot of this research has shown us what is happening that we might only have had some peripheral knowledge of. I already knew about what's happening at Scotto, but I'm not sure if some of the other aspects were, in my view, at that time. So, there's been a learning curve for me, and I think it's been a learning curve for officers as well, discovering just what a range of businesses we have. Now, beyond this, we have an Invest North Norfolk website. There's a lot of information. Unfortunately, because of the way our website is structured, it's not easy to find. But that's an issue outside this committee, and I think Cabinet. We are aware that our IT systems are becoming a little antiquated, and there are areas that could be improved. And if we're going to communicate what's going on, yes, it's fine putting this document up. I'm happy to accept that, and we certainly just need a summary. I'm happy to take that on board, and Cabinet will look at that. But we have to promote ourselves the way in which the world promotes itself these days, and that is online. And that is something we do need to look at, and I'm happy to accept that. But it needs to form a total review of IT, rather than just being one component of it. Otherwise, we end up with, let's say, our slightly hidden away in Invest North Norfolk site, which ought to be there, front-facing and very visible. So there are areas that need to be worked on, most of which I'm conscious of, and officers are conscious of. But sometimes wheels don't grind as fast, or electrons move as quickly as we'd hope.
Okay. I've got questions from Councillor Housden and Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several things really. There's indicative funding. You made reference to UK Prosperity Fund 6 times. We've just spent an hour and 3/4 going through budget, and obviously funding is going to be tight throughout the country. So I just wonder if that's a bit optimistic. That's my first point. Is it optimistic? Do you have any employment statistics, demographics? Are we losing employees in our district? Are we gaining employees? What's the demographic? Because I think that's an important point, and the retention of employment within the businesses. And we mentioned culture and heritage. What is our culture and heritage? I'd like somebody to tell me what North Norfolk District Council culture and heritage is, because culture and heritage is bandied about loosely, very loosely, never defined. And I think we need to decide what is the culture and heritage, not in this meeting, but I think that's a valid point. And coming back to funding, if you look at what people are doing, they're having to crowdfund things because there are no proper business loans. I've been just searching on my phone while we've been talking, and there's very, very limited funding. So I think all of these factors are vital. I'm not criticising the document, but the point is we have to be realistic as to how we support businesses, how we direct them to funding, what that funding is, how that funding's secured, what's the terms of that funding. And I think that's vital if we want to increase and bring employment businesses into the district. Sorry, there's rather a lot there.
Councillor Heinrich.
Okay, I think I've got the gist of that. If we take the last point first, if we had something like a national investment bank, there may well be more money available for businesses. You know, simple as that. Banks will look at it from a usual commercial point of view, and if they can't see a fast profit, they won't lend. Can't see a long-term life for a business, they won't lend to get it off the ground.
Well, there's a wider point.
We're not a dragon's den.
No, but that point is a wider point. We don't have bank managers we can go and see anymore. I'm funding something at the moment. I'm doing it, but I don't expect to see a bank manager. That's just not going to be possible. So, you know, we need a direct route to funding. You know, I'm talking to investors. That's fine because I meet lots of different investors of all sorts. I feel myself quite privileged in that sense, but a lot of people don't have that ability, and you can't talk to a bank manager anymore.
So certainly agree with that one. But the fact remains is, as a council, we don't have money to invest directly. We don't have a facility to provide banking. You know, this is outside our remit. You know, it's something that needs to be tackled nationally by whoever's in power. I don't care who it is, as long as they take on board. And I think the concept of a national investment bank that gets around the commercial interest of the big finance actors may be an approach. It may not. That's not an area of expertise for me, high finance. If I come back to the UK SPF and REPF, you know, the fact is these are short-term funding commitments from government under levelling up. It's got one more year to go. I have no idea what's happening after that. We have spent all the funding we have had so far. We are well ahead, and Rob will get a bit more as to where we are for next year, but it's pretty much all committed. Even at this stage, if there's funding available, it's not out to business.
Sorry, well, yeah, that's fine, but I mean, it's slightly optimistic to be looking at 2027 when Rob has got his funding committed, which is fine. That's brilliant. But, you know, we can't be looking at 2027 because we have no idea what's going to be on the horizon at that point in time.
I think that is the point. We have no idea. We have to be responsive to the situation we find ourselves in. And, you know, we know what we can do the next 12 months. After that, there'll be a different government, or the same government with different people in positions of power. Who knows? We have to see what happens. If there's further funding next year, we can then evolve the strategy to deal with that situation. The moment we can deal with what we've got in front of us, we know where we're going with it. I'll just outline it in a moment. But that's where we are. You know, you cannot make long-term decisions when government funding is always short-term.
But the point is that if you've got a demographic, you know your employment demographic, either you're losing it or you're gaining it, then you can work a strategy around your employment demographic, your employees or your employed demographic. That surely is a very, I accept it might be a lot, but a detailed piece of research which would be really good for North Norfolk, because we know, are we losing employees? What's the age structure of those employees? That helps us develop the strategy that you've ably set out here.
Without getting into detail, let officers respond in a moment. We know that one of the key issues for employers at the moment is actually getting staff. There is a shortage of staff, partly because young people get trained, they go to university, they don't tend to come back to North Norfolk because they don't see the wage structures and the challenge of jobs available here, despite the fact there are lots hidden away. You know, regrettably, they don't want to work in hospitality, for example. They certainly don't want to work in the care sector, which is really struggling. And because, you know, who wants to work for low wages and put in relatively poor working conditions. And, you know, that's not an issue we can deal with locally. We can look at what's available. We could try and encourage, particularly the younger people, to stay, but they have to have the sorts of jobs that will challenge them. You understand?
Yeah, sorry, that's made my point. Finding a strategy that keeps those people here. We can't solve the wider problems, but in a document like this, and you've obviously got very key discussions with significant businesses here, then we should be opening up to those businesses for that very point that you've just made as part of a strategy here. And you know, this debate could go on for ages, but I just wanted to make the point. But I just think it's vital. And I'm not saying you haven't, and I'm not saying you don't, but I'm saying it's vital for the future. This is the sort of thing to feed into this kind of strategy that keeps us rolling forward and to keeps North Norfolk District prosperity high beyond just the tourist industry.
Can I pick that one? Yeah. Completely concur with you, Councillor Housden. The number one issue when we go and visit businesses, the number one issue consistently is recruitment and retention. Almost without fail, and that has been the case for years. It's not unique to North Norfolk. It is a challenge in many or most rural areas, I would say. We do have some evidence behind that. So we did a workforce survey. Actually sits as an appendix item, so that will be in the final document, which did very much demonstrate that story. But acquiring the evidence is one thing, and doing something about it is another. So one of the items of delivery in there, I think, is probably for me, it's one of the most important elements of delivery, which is funded by UK Shared Prosperity Fund and identified in our investment plan, is a programme called Future Skills Now. It's in collaboration with Norfolk County Council. You'll find it in the action plan. And part of that work will be working with our key businesses to do that, first of all, to do that audit, to really understand what really are those straining long-term recruitment and retention issues, and really get to the bottom of that. So that's obviously part of the understanding. The second part of that then is working on the solutions, and in a way that perhaps we've not done before. So we're going to be looking at hand-holding them through those issues, essentially creating those pathways to the support that's needed, whether that's training providers, education providers, connecting them into the universities, etc. One of the challenges that kind of goes hand in hand with that, and we're all aware of this, and this is in the strategy, is that we don't have any headquartered training providers here in North Norfolk. Those who are looking for traineeships, apprenticeships, or even just any further education are having to leave the district, and that poses a genuine challenge for North Norfolk, because of course once they leave, making sure that they stay and come back here and invest in our district is a genuine challenge. And I'm not going to sit here and say we're all going to have the solutions here, but we're part of that solution. We're part of working with partners to overcome that. But it starts with building that database, building that intelligence, and then we hope to work with Norfolk County Council on that, with the view that that would then be a pilot and a stepping stone to greater emphasis and greater work in that area. That's where we're at the moment.
Good. I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Could I briefly add that the workforce challenges are across all sectors? We're pretty well aware of that, partly due to ageing workforce, but actually there's a link to what was discussed earlier on in the agenda, Councillor Holliday's interest in housing, affordable housing availability. So clearly there's a link between retaining local workforce and providing suitable affordable housing in numbers that are required in the right locations. So I'm sure that will come into that evaluation as well.
Okay, Councillor Cushing, then Councillor Hanking.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think several comments if I made, which I probably class as constructive observations, if I may. But I suppose when I first read this, I suppose my first thought that came to my mind is, well, who would you want to read this 60-page document? There's some excellent material in this. There really is, right the way through it, but I do find it quite hard to find. Something that Councillor Holliday and Councillor Dixon and I discussed is, if we're sort of structuring a document like this, if you look at page 26, which is a really good page, around key sectors and sites. So you've got all your key sectors in the district there. If it were me, I'd be structuring a document almost around those sectors. So for each sector, you'd be listing what your challenges for each of those sectors be, what opportunities we got, where is the strategic vision, where do you like to see that sector in 10 or 15 years' time? Acknowledge the fact actually this is a relatively small council, it's limited in actually what it can do, but there are others out there. There's very, as far as I can see, limited mention of the county council here. Now we're going to a directly elected leader structure. There's more money potentially coming into the county. Now, how do we tie in? How does our economic team work with their economic team to help develop those opportunities? What other opportunities are there out there in terms of central government? And I suspect there are a lot. We probably don't know what we don't know sitting on this committee, but I speak to people like John Fuller in South Norfolk, who's got his well plugged into what's happening down in London in government. And there are all sorts of things you could do around there. I think a few more metrics around those sectors would be really interesting as well. Now, this should be a living document, so this is not, to my view, this is not the final version. It should be updated on an ongoing basis. But I do think something around there, because I do think at the moment, the way it's structured, 60 pages, if you want to, people in the business world to pick this up and look at it, if it's structured around sectors, well, all they'd have to do is go and read their sector, wouldn't they, to get what they wanted out of it. They wouldn't have to try and trawl through a lot of pages to sort of draw out the nuggets of information, which are certainly contained within this. So trying to be some helpful observations here, if I may.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, in terms of working with the county, officers work very closely with the county colleagues. We cannot proceed in where we want to go without that close working. You know, the fact that it might not be totally obvious, it doesn't mean it isn't happening. You know, the business breakfast a couple of weeks back, county probably took half the time there because they were an integral part of where we're going. You know, if we don't work together, we get nowhere. We can't, you say we're a small council, we can't stand alone. We have to work with the larger authorities. We have to work with government where appropriate. I certainly agree that it's a living document. You know, it's not going to be fixed in time. As we move through, we will have to review it. We'll have to revise it. You know, you fix it in time, and you know, you don't follow a strategy just because it's written down. You review where you are not every 5 minutes, but certainly every few months, and amend what you're doing to meet whatever the situation that you're now facing. In terms, I've already said with government approval, we will produce a shorter summary document, and we can take on board your comments.
Councillor Hank, sorry.
Well,
there's
a section relating to the county deal, but you're absolutely right. The county deal is fundamental to how we can continue to assist our local businesses and develop the local economy. The dissolution of the local enterprise partnership is a part of that. So that picture is emerging at the moment, but we've got a very good partnership with the county. We work closely as colleagues. We jointly presented the business breakfast a couple of weeks ago with the county, and they're developing their own strategy, which we'll feed into. So just to say that, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hankin.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I congratulate Paul and company in putting together a first stage document in terms of strategy development for sustainable development. One of the issues that we looking at the list of companies, right? I would guess that the biggest proportion of companies in North Norfolk are SMEs or lower. SMEs, in order to grow, need funding, and I support Councillor Howson's comments here. In order they need funding for work in progress. They will not generate sufficient cash in order to buy that work in progress. There has to be some kind of function that enables an SME to fund that. And part of the question is, what are the local enterprise partnership doing? Because where I came from in Worcestershire, they had money, they provided grants in order for companies to buy simple tools, equipment, etc., and to fund work in progress. the banks are not in the picture when it comes to SMEs because they cannot fund unless the funding is secured on assets. And they won't have the amount of assets to be able to do this. So I think this is a vital, important issue in terms of business growth. Companies need to have somewhere to go in order to get funding for growth. So is the LEP, I understand it's more or less disbanded, is that correct? So they were the vehicle to provide match funding in order to fund that growth. That's a significant problem for any organisation to grow in sustainable development without major problem facing them.
I absolutely agree. And in terms of the LEP, I'll ask two officers.
Well, the functions of the LEP are transferring to the two county councils whose area it covered. So colleagues, individuals working in the LEP are largely going to be now working for Norfolk County Council or Suffolk County. And how that works, what their roles are going to be, I think are currently being worked out. We are administering some of our UK Shared Prosperity Fund or Rural England Prosperity Fund schemes through the Growth Hub, which was set up by the Local Enterprise Partnership.
Yep.
So we're keenly interested in making sure that that element of it transitions to counties and continues to function, which we're assured it will. We do have funding at the moment, actually, through those two programs that I just referred to. And we've got a good pipeline of interest from SMEs. I mean, actually, the vast majority still have the figures of businesses in North Norfolk are micro businesses. So we do currently have funding opportunities for diversification and different investment programs, which do require match funding, and also I should say for community initiatives as well.
But where does that funding come from?
That's the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and the Rural England Prosperity Fund, so from government.
So I'm running a small company, right? I just want a big order that would probably is capable of doubling my capacity. I've been to the bank. I don't have the assets to cover that. Where do I go in North Norfolk?
Ask my colleague.
That is a challenge, isn't it? Well, where would you traditionally, you may have gone to your friendly bank manager on the high street, and we know that's changing. We're in a changing landscape. I speak as someone who used to work in banking. I am a qualified financial advisor. I used to work in that world, I think part of the problem, of course, is that the nature of micro businesses is that unfortunately they have the least access to finance. They, even if you've got a bank that has a commercial element to it, quite often you have to have £1 million turnover before anyone's prepared to even pick up the phone to you, least of all see you. So these are challenges, and we're not sitting here presenting the solutions necessarily. The support that we do have on offer would normally come through through the Local Enterprise Partnership as it stands in their current position, because they do provide a growth hub advisors, and we're working with them. So they will do their best. They will provide one-to-one business support and provide that advice and signpost to the appropriate funding if that's available. But it is a genuine challenge, and it's not one that necessarily we're going to sit here and address today. In terms of funding, you've alluded to the UK Shared Prosperity and the Rural England Prosperity Fund. That's the bit that's in our gift. The support then is to work with partners to help them as best we can.
So that support is available now, is it? Through the LEP?
It absolutely is, yeah. So if you go onto the New Anglia Growth Hub, they will provide that support there at the moment.
Okay, so if I go on the website, it'll point me to that, will it?
It will do, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
all come through myself or any of my colleagues who we work
Thank you,
closely
Mr.
with.
Chairman.
Do you think that the example that you've given might be more kind of clearly articulated in this document indeed?
Yes. The short answer, yes. I mean,
you won't be
it's
the
a
only
work-
person that
it's a
will be
working
asking that
document.
question.
It's a working document. Councillor Heinrich has changed the direction here. That's quite clear on what needs to be done. And it needs to be evolved, but in order to sustainably grow business, they need funding. It's simple as that. And then they need to be signposted. I mean, I speak from some experience. I was part of Advantage West Midlands business company, where companies came to us for funding, and we were able to fund them on a match basis many times. But they needed the opportunity to attract that, to obtain that funding in order to move forward. It's not clear to me that that's available now, quite frankly. But I take your point. If it's there on the website, then we can point companies to that and say, look, it's there. Go and see what's available. It's not readily clear.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
Not, I mean, not only is it just on the website, that's, you know, we talked about partnership and collaboration. So we routinely, as part of our visits, of which some of those visits you attended with Stuart Damansing, but when it's not necessarily with a local member or yourself, we do include the New Anglia Growth Hub and bring them along to have those conversations with businesses as they are the experts in their field.
I just add that all the core information is available within the Invest North Norfolk website, and that is a place that can be updated regularly there, whereas we don't pay for that often. Too expensive for one thing. Updating the web is relatively cheap, but information is there. We need to make that more public, more obvious to people, and I'll take that on board.
Could I just chip in? It would just be on that point. It would be really useful when we have an update on this document, just to have a rolling assessment of those grant funds. You know, what might be available for this authority, how much. If we had that information, it just adds to any discussion that we have in overview and scrutiny, and looking at various aspects of what we have to scrutinise.
And more locally as local members.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have tried to keep members informed of where the money has gone. We cannot always give this level of detail requested, because at times, because some of these grants going out, they're being match funded and contracts aren't in place. We can, you know, there's commercial confidence issues involved.
I'm not worrying where it's gone. I'm looking at what's available for the future.
Ask officers to comment on, well, next year now.
Well, I could, I mean, it might be better if I pointed to the Invest North Norfolk page of the council's website, which has sections on business support, business grants and funding, loans, community grants and funding from NNDC, community grants and funding from elsewhere. There's a search facility for grants, starting up new businesses, selling and closing your business, and then media articles. So that's updated frequently. So that will tell you, if you're a business or just a casual inquirer, you know, what's available. And generally that will then direct you to the prospectus for that grant scheme or that loan initiative. So that should say where it is available.
No, that's fine. I just wondered, for overview and scrutiny purposes, these things come up, and this is a discussion. It's the one opportunity where we all get to look at things. So it's just useful to know what the rolling programme going forward is.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Withington.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. I just wanted to go back to Councillor Housden's comment about cultural, and I'm glad he's raised it, because it's something.
Can you speak a little nearer to the microphone?
Sorry.
I'm struggling to hear you.
Sorry. I just wanted to go back to Councillor Housden's comment about the cultural heritage in North Norfolk, and thank him for raising that, because we both are currently on the Arts and Culture Grant Committee, and so it's something that's quite important to both of us. It is in there, very much so. And actually on page 130, the action is to develop a cultural and creative sector strategy. And I think that reflects the importance of those small SMEs and sole traders across the county district, in particular, where, you know, North Norfolk and Norfolk have attracted those arts and culture-based businesses in particular. So I think it's really important that we have a handle on that, and this economic strategy reflects that. And that will be really good for us moving forward to not only have a knowledge of where those businesses are, but also have a greater understanding how we can support them to grow, because some of these do have the potential to move beyond just an artist in their studio in the garden, etc., or a photographer somewhere who can grow and start employing people. So it's an important part, and it's acknowledged in here. And in terms of our heritage, I think some of the work that's been started already looking at this as reflecting the need for, as you know, for museums, for example, for us to be working more closely together. And I know that that's already underway, because we have a lot of independent museums up here who are both attractions but also important businesses. So you know, I hope that reassures him that that is in there and very much part of that focus.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm getting nods of approval from Councillor Housden, so thank you. Right, I'd like to draw discussion to a close, and the recommendation that we have before us is that we note the contents of the strategy and the action plan and provide any feedback to inform the final document and to advise on any recommendations to Cabinet. So we seem to have two sort of levels here. We've got feedback, and I think there's been a fair bit of that actually that have come out in the course of discussion. That which might amount to a recommendation, I think probably we've had a recommendation from Councillor Holliday. I'm not sure whether you've noted that. And we've got, I think it's been offered, and I think it's been recognised that we as a committee would like to see a revised strategy, a strategy document which focuses very clearly on what that is and articulates that in full. And so I think that's another recommendation. Any others?
Could we clarify what the recommendation from Councillor Holliday is, and then vote on it, and likewise with the strategy document?
Indeed. Let's just start with the Councillor Holliday one.
It was to calculate the value of the different sectors. The only one that we've got calculated is the visitor sector. Is it greedy to put in that? Would it be possible to have other sectors included before we do the calculations? Because I felt there were some areas that weren't captured comprehensively, like aviation, for example, or transport, which are quite significant businesses in our catchment area. So that's two-part recommendation to capture some more sectors and then to work out the value.
Could I ask that that's a sort of a process recommendation, if you like, that we begin the work of developing that database of information, that sort of information base about each sector, because it'll be something which takes a lot of time, and for some areas it will be, you know, readily available. In other areas we'll have to do a lot of original research. So I'm happy to go away that we need to develop that kind of dossier of information about each sector, and hopefully with a view to bringing that together in one place. But it might be something which emerges gradually. I wasn't clear whether you wanted that information in the document prior to its sort of final publishing, or whether that's something we can take away after this is adopted.
You have a view on that?
Is it unreasonable to have it for what we have in front of us on page 26 as part of the document and have the process be the more expanded version? Do you think is that too much work? If it's unreasonable, then tell us.
I think to be very honest, I think it would be challenging, but we can. So I don't really want to kind of answer it with a superficial, give you a superficial response, but I think we need to go away and look at that a bit more closely. And I'm not sure that will make it into, let's say, the full council document in that timeframe. If I'm honest.
What I can say that Stuart's team has a much bigger document, which I counselled him to not include on the pages for this committee. So there's a huge sort of background data document that accompanies this. We can seek out the bits that relate to sectors, if you like, and probably publish that as an appendix at some point. I mean, how legible and how, you know, how much that will meet your desires at the moment, I'm not sure, but to actually undertake that piece of work in its totality and include it in the strategy, I think would be too much, because we would like to move past the kind of adoption of this and then start working it up and revising and monitoring and having that dialogue with businesses about the impact it's going to have.
You comfortable with that?
Yes, I mean, the process work will be actually valuable for going forward. It's not as if it's going to be cast in stone, but if you could collate the information that you've got and have it as an appendix, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is that a sufficient descriptor for that? In respect
Sorry.
of the
Sorry,
recommendation.
Chair, can I clarify
Yes,
what the recommendation is? So I think you've accepted that there will be some work to do, but you're still requiring a recommendation. So would it be that the economic development team develop the work of processing other sectors and calculate the value of the various sectors, and then the other information can be at a later stage? Would that be a sufficient recommendation?
Okay, thank you. Yep. And in respect of the strategy, I think probably it might be the simplest approach there. I think we've already had an acknowledgement that the strategy is distributed, if you like, through the document in various parts, and that those, we're not looking for a change of strategy here. We're looking for a way of which we articulate the strategy and present that into a more readable form. And so it would be an exercise there, I think, to extract the strategy, if you like, from the 60 pages and form that into a much more concise and brief document. Is that
Yeah, I've already accepted
Yeah.
that. You know, so.
Is that sufficient for your needs?
Yeah, as well as they can be proposed, voted on.
Yes, of course. We'll come to that. Yes, we'll come to that. So with those two additional recommendations, and can I have a proposer for each of them, or you want to deal with them separately or as a group? Well, let's deal with them individually. Councillor Holiday, you're the proposer of that. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Cushing. Can we have a show of hands on that then, please? Thank you. And in respect of the strategy document, can I have a proposer and a seconder for that? Councillor Housden and a seconder. Councillor Hankin. A show of hands, please. Right. They are the two recommendations that are in addition to us scrutinising this, and we have, I think, provided some other feedback in the commentary there, but they don't amount to recommendations. So you may want to make what you will of those. All right. Okay.
No, we will, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. If we can now move on to item 12, which is the waste update. I take it we don't have Councillor Ringer here today. Right, all yours, Officer Hems.
Chair, thank you very much. The report's before you. I think in terms of the three areas it covers, it is a periodic report. Tried to cover off things that members of this committee have previously looked at and expressed concern. I draw members' attention to the charts in Appendix 1, primarily associated with performance in terms of the collections, grounds maintenance, and street cleansing.
I'm pleased to report that we continue to see an improving trend in all collection services, and that is appears to be being sustained. That we have a position in terms of the number of missed collections that is as good as, if not better than, what would be described as industry standard. You will note that the position around the street cleansing and grounds maintenance has worsened slightly, but we're satisfied that that relates to two things. One, a greater focus due to the amount of time that my officers have in the environmental services team to be able to go and look at things other than dealing with missed collections issues. And two, a focus around the reporting methodology that Serco had in place, which meant that we are able to make sure that those issues are reported more accurately than I think was potentially being done over the summer months. It's not an area of concern to me in terms of the level of performance under the contract. Then finally, it is reported as appendix, or it is shown as appendix 2. It was apologies for confusion, but in terms of the performance of the call centre, I know that's been an issue for members of the committee in the past. They are now exceeding the performance management framework requirements, the authorities' requirements across the board very significantly, and in fact, I think have a very high level of performance within that call centre team, and we're not getting any significant issues as a result of that. The other part of that, which that I've just picked up on, is in terms of the gap analysis. So members will be aware that I raised this previously in terms of the number of outstanding issues that were present from the originally bid document that Serco submitted compared with what they were delivering. I'm pleased to report that continues to come down in terms of the level of items that are missing or not delivered. I think we're now down at 17 items, and that was from a list originally that I think was into the 150 sort of number originally. We're now down at 17 items that are outstanding. Five of those items are dependent on external suppliers, so their software supplier providing the functionality within their system. 4 relate to the same issue around one particular service to do with bulky collections, which we are currently in discussions with providers over and hope to be able to move forward in the not too distant future. 2 are related to carbon reduction, where they have predominantly done all of the work and submitted carbon reduction plans, but we've been backwards and forwards seeking some further clarification and improvements, and they can't write the other one off until they've signed off the plan. And 3 of those are around processes to do with annual reporting and planning, which aren't yet due, but I'm satisfied that are predominantly in hand and will come forward either through that process or through alternative methodology. So I'm satisfied in general around the performance of the contract. I think Serco have put a lot of effort and resource into improving things to the position we see at the moment. And as authorised officer of this contract, I am not uncomfortable with their performance, both now and their ability to move forward. Which brings me on to the second item of the update, which is around performance of the rounds. So they have proposed a further round and route reorganisation. That is due to 2 things. Firstly, they haven't recognised or realised the efficiencies that their original modelling last time have delivered. But secondly, County Council have provided disposal points for this contract. For the recycling element, it was at the depot at Aylsham, and that has been now moved
to North Walsham, the same site as the residual waste is disposed of. And so effectively they are taking the opportunity to improve things in order to minimise our mileage and transport arrangements, and therefore the carbon footprint of this contract. And then finally, in terms of food waste, and Officer Blatch touched on it earlier in terms of, and I think it was picked up on in terms of the position around the offer that has been made for capital funding for the costs. We basically, alongside a lot of other district councils and collection authorities around the country, feel that that is not adequate based on our modelling and our assumptions. It is based on a nationally delivered piece of work around modelling of costs from a national perspective, and so we will look to make representations around the level of that funding, as have a lot of authorities back into government, and they have supplied us with an evidence form that we now need to complete to demonstrate how we feel that is inadequate. I'm conscious that you probably want me to have relative brevity. I hope that is sufficient for your purposes, Chair.
Yeah, more than questions. Yes, I'm sure. Can I just check with you paragraph 2.4, where you mentioned about the website facility there? When will that be up and running?
Chair, I don't have an exact date. It's something that has been subject to work between both the environmental services team and our IT team. It's my understanding that it is progressing, but just needs a little bit more testing to get there. I can give you a further update if you want in terms of that, but it is something we are trying to work towards to improve the customer experience, and also to hopefully allow people to self-serve with information around where they're having difficulties with where they don't know whether their bin has been collected or not, and for what reason.
Okay, we won't tie you down to an exact day, but it might be useful to know roughly when it's going to come, when you anticipate that will be available.
Would just an update in writing to the committee, just with an anticipated date, be acceptable?
That would be fine.
Happy to provide that, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Howsett.
Can we just turn to page 137, Steve, please? Paragraph 8.1. I understand obviously about the 151 officer writing to DEFRA. And I'm scrambling while we're sitting here in the meeting to see whether we brought forward the 46 to the 155,000 into the budget analysis, and I can't find it at the moment, so I will have to go without the answer to that. That modelling from DEFRA, Steve, you refer to it, I think, somewhere earlier as well, that it doesn't give you the definitive parameters. Is that your sort of best and most accurate assessment, really, with the information that you've got so far?
So we obviously have 55,000 households, or give or take. Each one under this scheme would have to be provided with at least an internal caddy.
Yep.
A lot of schemes that get the best uptake also have an external caddy, because you don't want a massive caddy indoors.
Right.
So you tend to have a smaller internal and then a larger external caddy that you decant to for your weekly collections. Now, obviously, we know roughly how much those caddies are each from various suppliers, and so we have just done the basic sums in terms of cost. It might be that that the people who did the procurement or the estimates are able to get a much better rate for those caddies than we currently are able to access. If that's the case, I'd welcome it, but literally the cost would be down in terms of a relatively
few pence per if based on the calculation, it would be very small amount per caddy.
Right.
So
So are we carrying sorry, Mr. Chairman, but are we carrying this deficit figure forward in our budget? Because I can't, I'm trying to look through the figures that we've got in our papers.
At the current time, my understanding is that we are aware of it, but at the current time there is no, we're mandated to provide this, but obviously we do not know the details of when that funding, we know what funding is coming forward in terms of first offer. We don't know whether that will be the second or whether we will be able to access those at a cheaper. We're waiting for government to produce or RAP, who are the people who've done this initial estimate, to provide details of their calculations. I think it would be probably ill-advised until we have that information and the response from government to include things necessarily in our budget in totality.
Fine. Okay. So I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No,
They're just trying to sort of establish what's behind it, really.
At the moment, the honest answer is we don't know. We don't know whether government will shift in terms of the amount they give us, or suddenly someone will come out and say, "Please a caddy at the price that you want it for, that makes the figures work up." So until we know that, I wouldn't want to make further budgetary provision for things that
you're not sure. No, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Officer Stankley.
Yes, I'd just like to confirm what Mr. Hems has said in terms of we haven't included it in the capital budget because we don't have any firm figures to put in there yet. As soon as we do have anything further, there'll be a report brought before members, and it will need to go to full council to have that included in the capital programme.
Thank you very much. That's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Cushing.
Thank you. Can I ask a question around on page 136, 6.3? You mentioned that there'll be some changes to the collection rounds, and that's being fed through the process at the moment. Do you know when members will be told what areas are affected, and also do you know when residents will be informed of that, of any potential changes?
So yes, in terms of the information for members, at the current time we've asked Serco, so we've provided Serco with a list of all wards by postcode. So they are currently working through, they provided me with a first draft very recently of information that we're currently looking at, so that we will be able to provide postcode changes by ward. So the intention is that what we'll look at doing is providing roads, those postcodes, roads and addresses to members, so that they can see which days the change will be, which days will be impacted and which addresses will be impacted. So that is being worked on at the current time. There is a plan for resident communications. It is the actual communications themselves have been, I understand, agreed, but are yet to be signed off. I couldn't tell you the exact date that those resident communications start, but it is some weeks in advance of the rollout. We need to keep it current so that members of the public will not be told so far in advance that it becomes an old piece of information and they forget. But so there will be a leaflet going to every single household that will advise them of the changes and the days that they are changing to, etc. It will also impact, because before, when we did the day changes, it didn't impact either Tradeways customers or garden customers. They were planned, so they've rolled them all together. So effectively, garden customers will get a day change as well. So it will, well, some garden customers will get a day change as well.
I have to say that I have a sense of foreboding about some of this, because obviously the scale of it and how it's handled will be quite crucial. And the experience that we had with the major overhaul of changes and how long that took to settle down has been quite a major issue. And I think that the communication that goes out needs to be quite clear about how this is, why this is necessary. So the message isn't that we got it wrong first time, that, you know, that people kind of understand what the drivers are. And because I think that may be a significant call on public tolerance in the future. So I share some of that sort of concern there. And I'm not quite sure what you've got in mind as far as addressing that. Mr. Blatch, I see your hand is raised.
Thank you, Chair. So the leaflets and information will be provided to residents between Monday the 4th and Thursday the 28th of March. The explanations as to the further need for change is outlined in an article contained within the Outlook publication, which is being delivered during the week of the 11th of March. And the new rounds will commence on Monday the 8th of April to avoid the Easter bank holiday weekend. I don't think this is a change instigated by this council, is because it's driven by the learning that has been gained from the challenging implementation of 18 months ago, but also the change of collection point, as Mr. Hems has outlined, which has been imposed on us and the contractors by Norfolk County Council as the waste disposal authority.
Thank you for that. That's very useful. I think we as ward members will have, I think, an important role in making sure that parish councils understand this, and our residents as well, when we are handling the inevitable things that will go amiss, if only because residents don't put their bins out on the day that they're expecting to. So there's two parts to this. We understand, we've been all through this before, and we know that there's going to be miscollections for one reason or another. And that's why I had that kind of sense of foreboding about how big the scale will be. Yes, I'm sure it is.
I have both the T-shirt and the scars from last.
Yes. You'll have a few more, I suspect. Yes. Councillor Holliday.
With respect to that, as far as recommendation one's concerned, which is to just let things lie and you can tell us when things go wrong, could we not have a report in place for after that change goes over? Because I'd like to see, I have a lot more scars and more T-shirts than you have actually, Stephen. I'd like to see that this is all, rather than leaving it loose, I'd like a report back here. I don't know how the people feel after the change has been implemented and implemented enough. And I'd like and to see how the customer service care centre is performing, because that was a big issue last time.
I think, Chair, if I might, that was the intention of recommendation 2, which was for this committee to receive updates on that very issue.
Yeah, you happy with recommendation 2? Yeah, okay. Any other questions? No? Well, they've got 3 recommendations there. They are listed. I won't read them out. But are you comfortable with those 3 recommendations? I think there's merit in each of them. Can I have a proposer and seconder? Councillor Housden? Any? Councillor Vickers? Can I have a show of hands then, please, to accept those 3 recommendations? That looks unanimous to me. Right, thank you. Turning then to the last item we have is the work programme.
Chair, just to update the committee on the item that's not in the report, which is about the training. The head of democratic services and I have now had a chance to have conversations with the 3 leading specialist providers. We've just this morning now had all 3 proposals come through in terms to what the programme might look like and what the cost would look like. So with the committee's approval, our intention is then to talk to yourself and the vice chairman about what that training is and firm up that idea and go back to the providers. The proposal is that the training itself will be mid to late March, somewhere in that slot. The only other thing I would say is that following the discussions with them, it's become quite clear that some of the cultural issues that this council need to get explored, and the training will give us the chance to look at those in detail and hopefully find some solutions for bringing scrutiny forward.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on how long that might be? Might that be a half day? Might that be more than that?
It will be a full day. There'll be multiple sessions with different sets of members, and there also need to be a session with the senior officers as well.
Right.
So we've got slightly different proposals, but it will be at least a full day.
Okay. Are you comfortable that it gets progressed in that way? We've got the three quotations, and clearly there's a meeting that the vice chairman, myself, scrutiny officer, will be able then to progress that forward so that we have that at some time in the second half of March. You comfortable with that? Right, no absenters on that. Good. Anything else you want to mention on the work program? No? Okay, well, in that case, then I'll formally close the meeting. I'm sorry it's been quite as long as it has, but we've covered quite a lot of ground in quite a lot of detail. So thank you very much indeed for everyone's input and your attendance today. I formally close the meeting.